You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Let's start with a question. Why have so many societies, for thousands of years, come up with such gruesome ways to execute people? From being buried alive to being fed to wild animals, methods like boiling, burning at the stake, hanging, beheading, and firing squads were all devised as responses to crime, disobedience, or sometimes just political inconvenience. I know, just listing these makes most of us wince. But ask yourself, what do these methods have in common? They're all designed for finality, but rarely for mercy. Today, most countries have abolished the death penalty, but 54, including the United States, Japan, China, and Saudi Arabia, still carry out executions. Why do some societies persist? The answer is a complex mix of justice, deterrence, and, sometimes, tradition. So, what's changed over time? Increasingly, the question isn't just whether capital punishment is justified, but how, if at all, it can be made humane. Now, you might be thinking, surely today's methods are more humane, but let's look at the facts. Lethal injection, for example, is often assumed to be painless. Yet, shortages of drugs after pharmaceutical companies like FISA refused to supply them have led to botched executions lasting up to 2 hours. And it gets worse. Firing squads can leave someone alive for 2 minutes. The electric chair? Try 3 excruciating minutes. Hanging can take 11. Technical term time. Asphyxiation is when someone suffocates, and ventricular fibrillation refers to the heart's chaotic rhythm during some execution methods. Neither is pleasant. So, as we debate humane execution, we have to ask, do these methods truly minimize suffering, or just hide it behind a clinical veneer? Death by guillotine, believe it or not, was once judged the most humane execution method. Why? Supposedly, it brought instantaneous death. Picture this. The blade falls and the head is severed in a fraction of a second. To many, that sounds preferable to slow strangulation or electrocution. But then a chilling question arises. Does the brain, now separated, stay conscious for a few seconds? That's where things get fascinating and a bit unsettling. If you've ever heard tales of decapitated heads moving or making facial expressions, you're not alone. Is it just muscle reflex or lingering awareness? Let's dig deeper into this historical debate, because the answer isn't as clear-cut as you'd think. Let me tell you a story that's been told since 1536, after Anne Boleyn's beheading. Legend says her head tried to speak after being severed. Fast forward to the French Revolution, Charlotte Corday's head was slapped by an official, and witnesses swore her disembodied face looked offended. Are these just macabre myths, or did something real happen? Neuromuscular reflexes, the involuntary movements of muscles after death, might explain the grim spectacle. But if you saw lips move or eyes blink, would you believe the person was still in there? The boundary between life and death in these moments isn't always obvious. So, how do we decide what's reflex and what's consciousness? That's a question both science and folklore have grappled with for centuries. In the late 1700s, scientists like Samuel Thomas von Sommering and Jean J. F. Sue argued that decapitation wasn't as painless as claimed. They pointed to witnesses who saw eyes following movement or lips attempting speech post-decapitation. Could the cerebral cortex, the brain's thinking center, still process pain? Von Sommering even decapitated animals, noting their heads kept moving for seconds. He concluded some sensation might persist for up to a minute, which, as he said, is incalculably long for the sufferer. But critics countered, are these not just spinal reflexes? After all, we see people thrash during seizures and later report no memory of pain. So, who's right? In the absence of modern neuroscience, the debate raged on, feeding both scientific inquiry and public anxiety. Now, imagine you're a scientist in 1803. You've just read Luigi Galvani's discoveries about bioelectricity, the concept that nerves conduct tiny electric currents. Curious, you attach wires to a freshly decapitated head and connect them to a battery. The head's eyes and mouth twitch. Is this voltage proof of consciousness, or just electricity reanimating dead tissue? Onlookers in Poland and Germany saw these experiments firsthand. Some heads showed movement for up to 2 minutes. Others remained eerily still. Technical jargon alert. Electrophysiology is the study of electrical properties in living tissue. But back then, it was a tool for answering a much darker question: does a decapitated head know it's dead? Spoiler: the science wasn't conclusive, but it set the stage for a new era of investigation into death and consciousness. Jump ahead to 1975. Scientists decapitate lab rats and monitor their brainwaves, specifically EEG activity, which measures electrical impulses of the brain. The shocking finding: rat brains stayed active for up to 13.6 seconds post-decapitation. Worse, the EEG patterns suggested distress, maybe even pain before activity faded. Now, you might wonder, can we really compare rat brains to human consciousness? While nociception, the nervous system's response to pain, exists in both, subjective experience is far harder to prove. Still, animal studies raised fresh ethical questions about what constitutes a humane death, both for animals and, by extension, humans. So, does a decapitated rat's brain really tell us what a human would feel? Let's keep following the evidence. In 2011, Danish scientists set out to answer the rat consciousness question once and for all. Their experiment used electrodes to record EEG readings on both anesthetized and awake rats before and after decapitation. What did they find? A sharp dip in brain activity immediately after decapitation, followed by a brief 2-3 second spike, possibly the final flashes of awareness, then total silence within 10 seconds. Astrocytes and neurons, the brain's key cells, quickly lost function as oxygen vanished, a process called anoxic depolarization. It's like a city losing power block by block. Most intriguingly, researchers saw a wave of death, a surge of activity about a minute later, as dying cells released their last electrical bursts. The upshot? For rats, consciousness probably ends within 3 seconds, but can we safely project this finding onto humans? Let's talk about people. In 2023, neurologists published studies of critically ill patients taken off life support, monitoring EEGs to track brain activity as oxygen vanished. The results mirrored what we saw in rats: rapid loss of normal brain waves, followed by a final, dramatic wave of death, a last electrical gasp before all activity ends. In 2022, an 87-year-old patient's EEG showed a burst of activity in memory and cognition centers seconds after death, sparking debate about life recall. Think your life flashes before your eyes. Technical terms: cerebral hypoxia means the brain is starved of oxygen, while cortical silence is the complete cessation of brain activity. So, when does a person truly die? When the heart stops, or when the brain finally goes dark? Science is still fine-tuning the answer. So, after all this, do humans remain conscious after decapitation? All evidence suggests not. Loss of consciousness is nearly instantaneous within 2 seconds, according to the best studies. But the debate isn't just academic. Saudi Arabia still uses decapitation as a legal punishment, sometimes requiring more than one sword blow, raising further ethical questions. Elsewhere, the guillotine is history. In the U.S., legal minds like Judge Alex Kozinski have argued it's probably best but culturally unacceptable. And then there's the wild frontier of science: head transplants. Neurosurgeons like Sergio Canavero have speculated about moving a head to a new body. Could consciousness survive? For now, that's science fiction. Until we master keeping a brain alive with no blood flow, the talking heads of our nightmares will stay on the pagina in the lab.